Beautiful star, a hope of rest, for the redeemed, the good and blessed. Yonder in glory when the crown is won. For Jesus is now that star divine, brighter and brighter will he shine. Beautiful star of Bethlehem, shine on, shine on. Beautiful star of Bethlehem, shine upon us until the glory dawn. Oh, give us thy light to light the way into the land of perfect day. Beautiful star of Bethlehem, shine on, shine on.
So it's always interesting this time of year. I'm asked the question about why is it that Unitarian Universalists celebrate Christmas with such excitement and such power and such verve and vest and vigor, and why we take it so seriously. It's one of the most highly attended services of the year, are our Christmas Eve services, candlelight services, and they say, well, why? Unitarian Universalists, typically you don't believe in the virgin birth as some literal thing. You don't believe in the idea that Jesus is God incarnate. Those are typical Unitarian beliefs. So people say, I don't get it. And the thing is that if people understand the history of Christmas and the history of Christianity in America, they realize that the real question would be, why do Christians celebrate Christmas since it's so Unitarian? Now, I realize it sounds like I'm being provocative, but what I'm about to tell you this morning is that Unitarians and Universalists have so profoundly shaped the meaning and the practice of Christmas as we know it. And now, those of you who've taken the Roots class here at All Souls or who've been members for a long time, you know some of the history of how Unitarian Universalism in America is the offspring of the Puritans and the Pilgrims. I mean, look at this place. Can you imagine a more Puritan-looking church? And this chancel area up here was designed and built with the exact dimensions of the first church that the Pilgrims built when in Plymouth, where they worshiped their first holidays, not Christmas. So I'll get to that in a second. So by the late 18th and 19th centuries, we in the Unitarian tradition particularly were known as the liberal wing of these Puritan and Pilgrim, now known as congregational churches in America. And once this liberal wing formed, Christmas and America were never the same again. First, let me tell you how the Puritans thought of Christmas. They knew that December 25th was probably and very unlikely to be the actual birth date of Jesus. Jesus' birth date is not in the Bible anywhere. The Puritans figured that if God intended for us to celebrate Jesus' birth, that God would have let us know his birth date in the Bible. So it was clear to the Puritans that Christmas was not Christian, but it was a pagan holdover. The famous Puritan preacher Increase Mather in 1687 preached from the very pulpit that I served in Boston before coming here to All Souls in Tulsa. He said, the early Christians who first observed the Nativity on December 25th did not do so thinking that Christ was born in that month, but because the heathens' Saturnalia, named after the god Saturn, was at the time celebrated in Rome, and they were willing to have this pagan holiday transformed into a Christian holiday. And he was right. Christians placed Jesus' birthday in December because many of the cultures in the Roman Empire already had holidays at that time of year, and it was easy to replace those holidays with this new holiday about Jesus. Now, most people assumed that the Puritans, seemed pretty uptight. I don't think they used that word back then, but you know what I mean. they think it's because of that uptightness that they just didn't want people to celebrate Christmas and have fun, and that's why they outlawed the celebration of Christmas. They literally outlawed it, and Christmas was made illegal in the Mass Bay Colony for 22 years, from 1659 to 1681. And a steep fine was imposed on those who were caught celebrating it. Now, it's not as if they went house to house to find out who was celebrating Christmas, because Christmas back then was not celebrated in people's homes. The Christmas celebrations that came to America from Europe were more like Carnival or Mardi Gras celebrations, in which people went into the streets and there was a lot of drinking, a lot of partying, promiscuity, and even people in costumes. The lower classes went to the homes of the wealthy and expected to be provided good food and drink. At this one time of year, the servants and the workers would get served by their employers. Now, it's thought that this role reversal acted as a chance for workers to let off steam so that for the rest of the year, they would repay the benevolence of their employers with hard work and goodwill. Now, in that sense, Christmas served to maintain the status quo. Now, keep in mind, this developed during a time when America was an agrarian or farm-based economy. Winter was the slow time after the harvest had already been brought in. It was also a time that the new alcohol was ready to drink, and it was a time of the slaughtering of the animals. So there was fresh meat, there were good stocks of alcohol, and lots of leisure time. Christmas was a period of feasting and revelry. But as the economy industrialized, America became increasingly urbanized. The poor and the homeless populations grew in size, they grew in need, and they grew in animosity. The weeks between Thanksgiving and New Year's were increasingly filled with activities and expectations that made the wealthy classes very uncomfortable. Now, due to this quote-unquote problem, in the 19th century, Christmas was transformed into a domestic holiday that was celebrated in the home among families. This is when Santa Claus became popular and the idea of giving gifts to one's children. Now, the transformation also supported consumerism, and it kept young people off the streets where they might engage in troublemaking and promiscuity. Now, it was still a holiday of role reversal, but now it was the powerful among the family, namely the parents, would serve the servants, namely their children. Then the notion of charity developed because they were trying to help the poor as well as to appease the poor in order to make the streets safe and free of beggars. Now, at this point, at the turn of the 19th century, the Christmas tree was still not a part of the Christmas celebration at all here in America. Enter Charles Follen, a German immigrant and Unitarian minister. The rest of this story that I'm going to tell you now is so intertwined with Unitarian history and theology that I might not have believed it myself if I didn't read it in a book by a non-Unitarian historian named Stephen Nussbaum. Nussbaum's book, called The Battle of Christmas, was a Pulitzer Prize finalist in 1996. It sheds light on the many myths about Christmas, and it shows how the history of this holiday has shaped our culture. In it, he explains that the Unitarians used culture rather than politics as an instrument to influence the social order. They employed their cultural authority, which was a combination of literary skill and access to the most popular channels of print, in a strenuous effort to deal with what they feared were the corruptive cultural effects of consumer capitalism, especially among the young. The Christmas tree played a serious, if relatively minor, role in this larger project. Nussbaum refutes the common legends about the origins of the Christmas tree being brought in by Hessian soldiers, as well as one about it originating with Queen Victoria's German-born husband, Prince Albert. Instead, he traces the popular spread of the American Christmas tree to two authors, both of whom are Unitarian. One story was a true story about the Unitarian minister and Harvard professor, Charles Fallon, who I just mentioned, who set up a Christmas tree in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 1835. The story was made popular by a British writer, Harriet Martineau, who was also a Unitarian, who came to America and wrote a popular book about her travels across this country, which included a story about Fallon's Christmas tree. What she did not write about, but I want to emphasize today, was hers and Reverend Fallon's mutual endeavors to end slavery. There's an important connection between anti-slavery, Christmas trees, and Unitarians. Nussbaum writes, there were important similarities between the anti-slavery sensibilities and the new attitudes towards children. Abolitionists and educational reformers cared deeply for people who were powerless to resist the wrath of those who wielded power over them, namely slaves and children. Both types of reformers, he tells us, had a particular abhorrence of the use of the lash as a form of punishment. Prominent Unitarians were leaders in both the anti-slavery movement and the movement for educational reform at the time, and as it turns out, also the spread of the Christmas tree. These were not unrelated. As a matter of fact, these all have deep theological roots. And that's why, more than anything, I bring it up this morning. In Nussbaum's own words, child-rearing practices were linked to theological beliefs. Whether parents chose to beat their children or lavish attention on them on Christmas was linked to whether they believed in original sin. Unlike the Puritans of their day, early 19th century Unitarians did not believe that humans were born for damnation. Puritans, and most evangelical Protestants in those days, believed that people were inevitably stained at birth by an original sin that corrupted them at their very core by causing them to be willful and selfish. Such a defect was thought to be so deep-seated that it could not be removed by any act of will, no matter how strenuous, because the will itself was part of the problem. So they believed a person's only chance was a free gift of divine, arbitrary, and irresistible grace. Puritan parents felt that it was their obligation to break their child's will as early as possible. Unitarians, on the contrary, believed that the will should be trained rather than broken. The will might be imperfect, but it was not fundamentally corrupt, according to the Unitarian theology. Unitarians strenuously believed that human beings were responsible, utterly responsible for their own actions. Now, can you see the connection between anti-slavery and progressive education? One group believed that people were depraved and that their will needed to be broken. The other group believed that people were good and that their will needed to be trained. Once you accept that people are inherently worthy, it's hard to justify slavery. The difference between breaking and training the will created very different philosophies of education as well. Unitarian minister and abolitionist Theodore Parker said, "Men often speak of breaking the will of a child. It seems to me they had better break the neck. The will needs regulation, not destroying. I should as soon think of breaking the legs of a horse in training him as of breaking a child's will." So what does the Christmas tree have to do with all of this? Well, it turns out that the young British poet and essayist Samuel Taylor Coleridge, famous for poems like Kubla Khan and The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, at the age of 26, decided not to pursue his plan to become a Unitarian minister, and instead spent the Christmas of 1798 in Germany. While there, he witnessed a Christmas tree ritual involving the decoration of evergreen trees. What distinguished this ritual from the ones that had started to happen in parts of America was that the children not only received presents from their parents, but they gave presents to their parents. The exchange of presents, Coleridge believed, turned what had become in the United States a ritual of children's selfishness and materialism into a learning about giving and receiving, and engendered an authentic and loving familial relationships. He wrote about this, and in 1824, it was published, what he wrote, in the Christian Register, which was the American Unitarian Church's official journal, which was the precursor to what we know now as the UU World magazine. In the next few years after his article was published, two famous American Unitarian authors wrote stories that incorporated the Christmas tree. The most famous of these was Catherine Sedgwick, and the other was her sister-in-law, Elizabeth Dwight Sedgwick. In each of these stories, the Christmas tree represented something authentic and good. The stories tell of strong families in which the children are central and in which the holiday allows them to cultivate their character. In Elizabeth Sedgwick's book, one year, instead of presents, Santa puts a poem in each child's stocking. As Nussbaum explains, the poem points affectionately but firmly to each child's character flaws, such as a readiness to lie, a quick temper in one case, a lack of perseverance, or selfishness. St. Nicholas adds the promise that he will return the following Christmas to check up on the children's progress. The son who is inclined to dishonesty grumbles, "I know I'll get something from old St. Nicholas another year by hook or by crook." After a year in which the children struggle to be good, assisted by their father's constant reinforcement to conquer their weaknesses, it leads to the next Christmas in the book when St. Nicholas does indeed bring each child a handsome gift. This story exemplifies the Unitarians' theology that good character is part of everybody's true nature, but children need to be raised in ways that allow them to realize it. The Christmas tree ritual was presented as a way to steer Christmas away from selfishness and away from materialism and make it a part of the positive training of children. Therefore, the Unitarian Church's agenda was to use the concept of the Christmas tree as a way of spreading this notion and a custom for families across the country. Catherine Sedgwick's book, along with Harriet Martineau's, is especially credited with popularizing the custom throughout upper and middle class America. Within a few years of the publication of their books, Christmas trees and the exchange of presents became a regular part of the American Christmas holiday for people of almost all denominations and all ethnicities. Many prominent Unitarians continued to work for abolition and for education reform. At one of the first anti-slavery fairs, there was a decorated evergreen shrub. On it, there was a sign that read, "Persons are requested not to handle these articles which, like slavery, are too delicate to touch." Nussbaum explains that this was a sarcastic reference to the reluctance of most respectable Americans to discuss the slavery issue. Nussbaum believes that this may have been the first public Christmas tree in America. The story doesn't end there. As a matter of fact, Nussbaum's entire next chapter is dedicated to how Christmas became known as a time of social outreach and a time of charity. The major influences include another Unitarian, Charles Dickens, whose story, A Christmas Carol, satirizes entrenched wealth and power and criticized the popular notion that poverty was God's judgment. Dickens' story of generosity and charity during the Christmas season has remained a classic. And to this day, his version of Christmas has dominated the popular meaning of this holiday. Another prominent Unitarian influence was Margaret Fuller, who spent part of her Christmas day in 1845 visiting deaf and dumb children who lived in an asylum in New York. Another Unitarian, Horace Greeley, who was the publisher and owner of the New York Tribune, wrote an article about Fuller's visit to this community in his paper, and within a few years, the charitable agencies institutionalized these events, which increased their popularity and their fundraising of going out and helping people who were in need during the Christmas holiday. Now, in this same era, well-known Unitarian author Louisa May Alcott wrote Little Women, in which she told of 4 heroic women who spent Christmas morning bringing presents to poor children. But that's not all. The Unitarian influence penetrated not only home life and secular society, it also changed the meaning of the focus of Christmas through the writing of hymns. Some of the classic hymns, the first one we sang this morning, for example, I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day, was written by Unitarian poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. And the enduring favorite, which we'll sing in a little while, It Came Upon a Midnight Clear, was written by Unitarian Edmund Hamilton Sears. These hymns were radical in their time, because until these hymns were written, Christmas hymns focused on the nativity and the birth of the Savior. Unitarian hymns like Sears and Longfellow's focused on the social gospel of peace on earth and goodwill to men, which has become the meaning for most people of this holiday. Eventually, these hymns, along with their social message and theology, would be sung and accepted in churches all across this land. They'll be sung in almost every Christian church in America and in the English-speaking world over the next couple of weeks. My friends, this is our holiday. So for those of us who will be sitting around a tree over the next few days, over the next few weeks, and exchanging gifts with family, take a moment to realize the potential of the path that we're on and the Unitarian tradition that we are a part of. In this season of hope, even if you do not celebrate a hope that expects a Savior to come down from on high, we can have a hope in the progress of humanity towards greater compassion and understanding and equality. We can continue to proclaim that with the birth of every child, no matter where they're born, what papers they have or don't have, no matter what culture or color or ethnicity or creed, that with the birth of every child, humanity has the possibility of coming closer to a world of peace and goodwill to all. That's why each time unto us a child is born is a holy time and a time of hope and celebration. Merry Christmas. As we go forth and head into our congregational meeting, I want to just remind you, as the message hopefully did this morning, how important this tradition that we are the stewards of in our times is, how important it is for our community, how important it's been for our country. We continue to do the prophetic work that we feel called to do as a congregation. We don't always agree, even in those times. I told you the story of those who were moving things forward in a progressive way, working for anti-slavery and all those things. It wasn't as if that was non-controversial in those times, as if everybody sitting in the pews all agreed on those issues in their times, just like we don't all agree on all the issues in our times. But we continue to forge forward, trying to be faithful to the ideas of the human value and worth that comes from a deep theological core about humanity and nature and their possibility. With that, I'd invite you to rise for our benediction. Go out into this season in peace, have courage, hold on to what is good, and return to no person evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted, support the weak, help the suffering, honor all life. Go and be blessed and be a blessing. Amen.
We're so happy you're visiting with us online today. We love connecting with people all across the country and around the world, sharing our powerful message of love beyond belief.
There's something new happening here. You can now join All Souls as a virtual member. Our virtual membership is designed for friends who live outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and who want to engage with All Souls in a meaningful way.
You can be part of an expanding family, a global family really, wherever you are. If you live in Oklahoma,
Ohio,
or Orange County, California,
Canada,
or Cameroon. By becoming a virtual member, you'll be able to deepen your connections with members and friends here in Tulsa and with members wherever you are.
Each week, you'll receive special All Souls content tailored for you, our virtual members. Virtual members have access to pastoral care, to personal prayers, and also receive invitations to exclusive web events.
You can learn more, and if you're ready, you can become a virtual member today by visiting allsoulschurch.org/virtual membership.
We're grateful our ministries are having a positive impact on your life, and we want to share the good news of love beyond belief with more and more people. So no matter what, we need your support to keep this ministry growing and thriving, so please consider making a gift today. You can do so by texting
LOVEBB for Love Beyond Belief to 73256, or simply visit our website. You are a blessing in our lives. May you be blessed
and be a blessing.